The seat they pulled out for me wasn't at the main table. It was at the kids' table, next to crayons, chicken tenders, and a paper crown waiting on my chair. My name is Erin Mercer. I'm 32. I live in Chicago, and I've spent most of my life learning how to smile through moments that told me I didn't belong. The night of the family dinner, I thought things would be different. The restaurant was the kind of place where you had to wait 2 months for a reservation. White tablecloths pressed so sharp they could cut, chandeliers dripping light like melted gold, the air heavy with steak and red wine. A waiter held the chair out for me, his hand steady, his smile professional, until I realized which chair it was. The one set a few feet away from everyone else, the one with a booster seat shoved underneath. I laughed too quickly, falls like maybe it was a mistake, but my dad didn't blink. My mom tilted her head, whispering in that sugar-coated tone, "Don't make a scene, sweetheart." So I sat, next to my 7-year-old niece, Olive, who was busy stacking sugar packets into a tower. She looked up at me and grinned, pushing the paper crown toward my plate. "You can be queen," she said. Her voice was innocent, but every chuckle from the main table landed sharp in my chest. I picked up the crown, felt the flimsy cardboard between my fingers. A joke, a role, a reminder. My brother Chase raised his glass, the crystal catching the chandelier's fire. "Here's to family," he said, looking directly at me. The word burned like a test I had already failed. I forced my lips into a smile, chewing on silence instead of steak. The clink of silverware and bursts of laughter from the main table washed over me, loud and hollow. I kept my hands folded, but inside my pulse was running wild, each beat spelling the same truth. They didn't invite me to honor me. They invited me to remind me of my place. And sitting there, crown untouched, chicken tenders cooling, I thought I understood humiliation, but the night was only just beginning. The laughter from the main table was sharp enough to slice through the soft jazz, spilling from the speakers overhead. I sat there, crown untouched, Olive humming some cartoon song under her breath, while the clinking of glasses grew louder, like applause for a play I wasn't cast in. Chase leaned back in his chair, his blazer catching the chandelier's glow, and tapped his knife against the rim of his wine glass. "Here's to new beginnings," he said. My father grinned wide, lifting his glass higher. "To Chase, our family's pride." The words landed heavy. Pride, success, achievement, words that had never been tied to me. I tried to focus on the silver bucket of ice water at the kids' table, condensation dripping, puddling like sweat across the linen. My mom glanced over, the corners of her mouth tight. "Sweetheart, eat something," she whispered. It wasn't concern, it was choreography. Keep me quiet, keep the night polished. I reached for a chicken tender, dipped it into ketchup, and forced myself to chew. The salt and grease coated my tongue, mocking me. I could almost taste the ribeye drifting from the main table, charred edges, butter melting down the cut. Olive leaned closer. "Why are you over here with me?" Her question was simple, but it broke through like a siren. I pressed a smile. "Because you're my favorite person in this room." And it was true, even if the truth was soaked in bitterness. My mother's laugh from the main table cut me off. She was mid-story about how Chase had closed his biggest deal yet, how he'd stepped into his role as a real leader. Every sentence was a ribbon tied around him, a reminder that I was only a placeholder in the family scrapbook. Gloria, my aunt, caught my eye across the room. She wasn't laughing. Her gaze lingered, something between pity and warning. When Chase clinked glasses with my father again, I saw her slip her phone onto her lap, typing something quick, deliberate. Olive tugged at my sleeve. "They're talking about Uncle Chase again." She wrinkled her nose. "He's boring." I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat. I sipped from the water glass, its chill shocking against the heat rising in my chest. Then came the sound, a fork tapping glass again, my father's voice booming, carrying across the entire restaurant. "And let's not forget Lila. She's building her platform. She's becoming someone. We're proud of you too, darling." Applause, cheers, smiles. I clapped softly at the kids' table, my palms barely making noise. And then, like it was scripted, my father's eyes slid toward me. His smile faltered for just a beat before he spoke. "And Erin has always been good with children." The table erupted with polite laughter, the kind that sounds kind but cuts deeper than cruelty. Olive blinked up at me, confused. "Why is that funny?" I had no answer. My throat tightened, my jaw clenched. I folded the paper crown in half, once, twice, until it fit in the palm of my hand like something disposable. Across the room, Gloria's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, then at me, and mouthed 2 words. "Check later." My blood ran cold, because for the first time that night, someone wasn't laughing. Someone was handing me a secret, and I didn't know yet. But that secret was about to flip the entire table. The jazz softened into something slower, almost mournful, as if the restaurant itself could feel the weight gathering in my chest. Gloria's silent message still pulsed in the back of my mind. Check later, but later didn't come. It arrived faster than I could brace for. A waiter in a black vest glided past the main table, silver tray balanced perfectly. He stopped at me, not Chase, not my parents, not the head of the table, me. "Miss Mercer?" His tone was neutral. Rehearsed, he placed a slim leather folder in front of me with quiet precision, like lowering a coffin lid. My fingers froze. I didn't move. From the main table, Chase smirked, his voice carrying. "Go ahead, sis. You've always been so responsible." My father chuckled, not even trying to hide the approval in his eyes. My mother lifted her glass, sipping her wine, pretending she hadn't heard. Lila glanced away, phone angled toward her plate like she was live streaming the humiliation without ever pressing record. Olive peered over, frowning. "Why'd they give you homework at dinner?" I swallowed hard, the room shrinking. The chandelier's glow seemed harsher now, bleaching every surface. My palms itched. Slowly, I opened the folder. The bill. Not for my plate, not even for the kids' table. For everything. Ribeyes, bottles of wine. Desserts I hadn't touched. 4 figures staring back at me in black ink, my name written on the slip. Erin Mercer. A chill crawled through me. It wasn't an accident. Someone had told the waiter, someone had written my name down, decided this was the role I would play, the scapegoat. I looked at my father, he lifted a brow, daring me. Chase raised his glass again, eyes glinting with satisfaction. Family takes care of family, right? I pressed my lips together so tightly they burned. My throat screamed to spit the truth back at them, to let the entire restaurant know what kind of people they were. But all I managed was silence. The silence wasn't weakness. It was survival. I reached for the pen tucked into the folder. My hand shook once, then steadied. The ink bled onto the paper as I signed my name, the letters carving themselves into more than just the bill. When I slid the folder shut, the laughter at the main table picked up again, a performance resuming after intermission. To them, it was done. They had put me back in my place, but Olive leaned in close, whispering, "That's not fair." Her words cracked something open in me. Not anger, something sharper, a reminder that someone, at least one person, could see the imbalance. Across the restaurant, Gloria's eyes met mine again. She tilted her phone slightly, enough for me to catch the subject line glowing on the screen. Mercer Family Trust. My breath caught. The bill in my hand wasn't just numbers, it was proof of how little they thought of me. But Gloria's screen, that was proof of something else. Proof that the seat they forced me into tonight might not be the seat I'd hold tomorrow. I slipped the pen back into its slot and pushed the folder toward the edge of the table. My pulse slowed, deliberate, each beat whispering the same promise. You won't keep me small forever. The night wasn't ending here. It was only turning. The folder was gone, the bill carried off, but its weight clung to my chest. Around me, the clatter of forks and the hum of conversation blurred into static. I stared at the empty space on the table where the paper crown had been, folded small enough to vanish into my palm. For a moment, the restaurant dissolved. I wasn't 32 in a velvet booth under golden light. I was 12, sitting at the lake house in Door County, Wisconsin, staring at the long wooden table my grandfather Walter built with his own hands. It smelled of cedar and polish. The chairs creaked like they were alive, and for once I wasn't at the folding card table by the kitchen. I was at the main table, my legs barely long enough to touch the floor. Walter had pulled the chair out himself. "Sit here, Erin," he'd said. His voice was low, certain, as if the placement mattered more than the meal. Chase had protested. "She's just a kid." Walter raised a snowy eyebrow. "So were you once. Don't forget." That shut Chase up, at least for the evening. Dinner that night wasn't fancy. Roast chicken, cornbread, green beans snapping fresh from the garden. But the way Walter looked at me, steady, unblinking, made the food taste like something sacred. I remember tracing the grain of the table with my fingertips, whispering to myself, "This is what belonging feels like." He leaned in when dessert came, a slice of blueberry pie. "Listen, Erin," he said, lowering his voice. "A table isn't just wood. It's where power sits. People think chairs don't matter, but they do. If someone tries to push you away, you find your way back, quietly if you must, firmly when you can." I'd nodded, not fully grasping it, but the memory lodged itself in me like a compass point. Back in the restaurant, I blinked hard, dragging myself out of the past. My family's laughter dragged me back into the now. Chase was showing photos on his phone, passing it around the main table like holy scripture. My father leaned in close, nodding as if every image was proof of glory. My mother dabbed her lips with linen, perfectly composed. I wondered what Walter would see if he walked in tonight. Would he notice the booster seat shoved under my chair, the bill slid across to me, the crown meant for children, offered like a joke? Or would he only see the silence I was holding, the same silence he once told me was strength if I chose it to be? A hand touched my shoulder lightly. Olive again. She whispered, "Do you want to switch seats? I'll sit here and you can sit with them." My throat tightened. Out of the mouths of children, the only offer of fairness in the entire room. I smiled and shook my head. "No, sweetheart, you stay. This seat is mine tonight." The words surprised me as they left my mouth. Not bitter, not resigned, just claimed. From across the room, Gloria slipped her phone back into her purse, her eyes catching mine. She gave the smallest nod as if to say, "Walter didn't forget you. Neither will I." The taste of cedar and blueberry pie rose phantom-like on my tongue. The lake house table, Walter's steady hand on my shoulder, his voice, "If someone tries to push you away, you find your way back." I straightened in my chair, folding my napkin slowly across my lap. The laughter around me dimmed in my ears as though muffled by water. My silence wasn't shrinking me anymore. It was holding space until the right moment. And for the first time that night, I wasn't thinking about how small they'd made me. I was thinking about how much bigger the story could get. The folded crown still sat in my lap, edges bent, cardboard soft from the press of my fingers. I smoothed it open, not to wear it, but to see what it really was. Cheap paper with printed jewels, something that could never survive a single rainstorm. And yet, it had been offered to me like a roll. Olive leaned closer, ketchup on her sleeve. "You should put it on," she whispered, eyes shining with a child's loyalty. "If you're queen, then they can't laugh at you." My throat tightened. I smiled for her, slipping the crown onto my head for a second, letting it rest there. The main table barely noticed, except my mother. Her eyes flickered, sharp for just a beat before she looked away, as if the sight unsettled her. "See?" Olive giggled. "You look perfect." She clapped her hands once, proud of her fix. I left the crown there a moment longer than I should have, then slid it gently onto Olive's chair. "Queens know when to pass the crown," I told her, voice soft, layered with meaning she couldn't hear yet. My phone buzzed against the linen napkin, a message from Gloria. Just 2 words. "Check the trust." A rush of heat swept through me. The word trust wasn't casual. In this family, it meant only one thing. Walter's trust, the estate, the documents no one ever wanted to discuss, but everyone silently circled like vultures. I slipped the phone into my palm, screen hidden, heart pounding. Gloria didn't glance again, but her fork moved mechanically, her posture stiff, like she'd already said too much. At the main table, Chase laughed loudly, slapping my father's shoulder. "You know I'm expanding the business next quarter. We'll need more space." My father nodded, proud, unaware, or unwilling to notice the current running beneath the evening. My mother said, "You'll manage, Chase. You always do." Her voice held that velvet approval I'd never tasted. I stared at the crown beside Olive's plate, a child's toy, disposable. But the word trust throbbed louder than the clink of silverware. If Walter had left something, if Gloria had just confirmed it, then maybe my place wasn't as small as they thought. And yet fear threaded itself through the thought, because knowledge in this family was never a gift. It was a weapon. Eat, my mother said suddenly, her gaze flicking to me. You're pale. I'm fine. The words came out steadier than I felt. Olive tugged my sleeve again, whispering conspiratorially, if you don't want the crown, I'll keep it safe. Queens need guards. She stuffed the folded crown into her tiny purse, her face glowing with the seriousness of her role. Something about that made me inhale deeper, chest loosening for the first time that night. A guard, a witness. The restaurant buzzed on, waiters weaving between tables. Plates of creme brulee and espresso shots landing with delicate ceremony, but all I could feel was the heat of Gloria's message burning against my palm. I didn't know what the trust held. I didn't know why Gloria had chosen tonight to send me that signal, but I knew this. My family had just written my name on a bill meant to break me. Walter might have written my name somewhere else, somewhere they couldn't erase with laughter. The thought steadied me. My silence no longer felt like surrender. It felt like waiting. And if they wanted me at the kids' table, so be it. Because when the truth surfaced, I wouldn't need a crown of paper. I'd have something heavier, unshakable. Across the table, Gloria finally looked at me again. Just once. A glance that said, hold steady. The real seat is coming. That night, I barely slept. The crown, the bill, Gloria's text, they all circled in my head like vultures waiting for a landing. By morning, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I drove to Gloria's house on the north side, a brick two-story that always smelled faintly of lavender and old books. She didn't greet me with hugs or pleasantries. She simply opened the door wider and said, kitchen table. There, spread across a faded floral cloth, were folders, yellowing envelopes, a thick binder with Mercer Family Trust embossed faintly across the cover. My pulse quickened. Gloria gestured for me to sit. Walter didn't trust many, she said, settling opposite me. But he trusted you. He made sure of it. Her words felt unreal. I opened the binder, hands trembling just enough to rattle the pages. Legal language, dense paragraphs, signatures crisp and dated. My grandfather's name scrawled in careful ink, and then mine. Successor trustee, Erin Margaret Mercer. I traced the letters with my fingertip like they might vanish if I blinked too long. What does this mean? I whispered. It means, Gloria said, leaning forward, you don't just have a seat at the table. You own the table. I flipped further. Listed assets. The lake house in Door County. Accounts I didn't know existed, but the page that stopped me cold. Commercial property, River North. The very building Chase's company leased for his headquarters. The air thickened. I could almost hear my family's laughter echoing from last night, but now it rang hollow. They'd handed me a bill to humiliate me, not realizing the deed beneath their feet already carried my name. Gloria watched my face carefully. Walter knew what they were. He saw the favoritism, the small cruelties. He told me once, Erin will need proof, not just memory, so he left it here. I closed the binder slowly, my reflection warped in the plastic sleeve. Proof, not of love, maybe, but of foresight, of a grandfather who had seen through the performance and chosen differently. For the first time in years, I felt taller in my chair. Not because the world had changed overnight, but because the ground underneath it had shifted. Quietly, permanently, I met Gloria's gaze. If I tell them now, she shook her head. No, you wait. You choose the moment. Power isn't loud, Erin. It's patient. I exhaled, steadying myself. The booster seat, the crown, the bill, all the ways they tried to keep me small, suddenly shrank against the weight of Walter's ink. My phone buzzed again. A message from Chase, tone smug. Thanks again for last night, sis. Family takes care of family. I almost laughed, because soon, very soon, he'd learn exactly how true those words were. I closed the binder and pressed my palm against its cover. a quiet vow forming inside me. I wouldn't need their approval, their toasts, their forced laughter. I already had the one thing they couldn't take: the table. By the next afternoon, the binder was no longer just a weight in my bag. It was leverage. I called Hannah Whitaker, the only lawyer I trusted, someone I'd met years ago while working on nonprofit grants. She had a way of reading contracts like they were confessionals. We met at a quiet cafe in Lincoln Square, the kind with scratched wooden tables, chalkboard menus, and the smell of espresso strong enough to rattle your ribs. Hannah arrived in her navy blazer, her hair pulled back in that no-nonsense knot that made her look like she'd already won the case before it began. "You sounded urgent," she said, sliding into the chair opposite me. I pulled the binder from my bag and set it between us. The weight landed with a soft thud. "It's about my grandfather, about the trust." Her eyes sharpened. She flipped it open, scanning quickly, her finger tracing the legalese with the precision of a surgeon. A low whistle escaped her lips. "Successor trustee, Erin, this isn't just paper. This is control." I know. My voice was steadier than I felt. Chase's company leases from this property. Half of what they brag about sits on land Walter left to me. Hannah leaned back, calculating. "So technically, you could terminate the lease. Evict them if you wanted." The thought sent a flicker of satisfaction through me, but I shook my head. "That's not what I want. Revenge isn't the point. Not like this." She raised a brow. "Then what is?" I exhaled slowly. "Boundaries. Respect. They've spent years making me small. Last night was just the loudest example. I don't want to humiliate them. I want to make them sit at one table without the games. If they want the lease renewed, it comes with conditions." Hannah's lips curved, half a smile, half approval. "You want a code of conduct, a family contract." "Exactly." She pulled out her notepad, pen scratching fast. Clause 1, lease renewal contingent on inclusive decision-making. Clause 2, no derogatory behavior at family functions. Clause 3, acknowledgement of you as co-equal in any public or private representation of the Mercer family. Hearing it aloud made my chest loosen. For once, my worth wasn't a begging note. It was a clause, inkable, enforceable. Still, doubt crept in. "They'll laugh. They'll say it's ridiculous." "Let them laugh," Hannah replied calmly. "While they laugh, you'll be holding the deed." Her certainty anchored me. I thought of Walter again, his steady voice over blueberry pie. If someone pushes you away, you find your way back. Maybe this was the way back, not loud, not cruel, but undeniable. I signed the draft Hannah prepared with her swift handwriting. The pages weren't thick, not like the trust binder, but they carried something heavier, my intent. As we packed up, Hannah paused, her tone softening. "One warning. When people are forced to face the mirror, they break or they bend. Be ready for both." I nodded, gripping the folder. "I've spent a lifetime bending. I think it's time they do the breaking." We walked out into the late afternoon sun. Chicago's air smelled of roasted coffee and exhaust, alive with noise. But inside me, there was stillness. Control didn't mean shouting louder than them. It meant writing the rules they'd have no choice but to follow. And for the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for the next humiliation. I was preparing the terms. The following week, I sent out the invitations myself. No glossy envelopes, no embossed lettering, just a plain group text. Dinner, Saturday, Jefferson Park. Everyone sits at the same table. I chose a diner I'd loved since college. Formica counters, vinyl booths patched with duct tape. A bell that jingled every time the door opened. No chandeliers, no velvet seats, just fried onions in the air and the comfort of bottomless coffee. When my family walked in, they hesitated. My mother's nose wrinkled at the smell of grease. Chase glanced around like he was calculating how fast he could leave. Lila tugged at her jacket, clearly uncomfortable without her curated backdrop. My father, stiff in his pressed shirt, muttered, "This is different." I stood near the hostess stand, calm. "Yes, it is. Follow me." The waitress led us to the back, where one long table waited. No kids' table, no head table, just one. Olive squealed. "We all sit together? Finally!" She scrambled into a chair, proud as if she'd solved the puzzle herself. The rest of them sat reluctantly. I could feel the weight of their disapproval pressing against the ketchup bottles and sugar caddies. Chase leaned in first. "So, Erin, what's the point of this? Another lecture?" I met his eyes, steady. "No lectures, just dinner, one table." He smirked, ready to dismiss me. But before he could, Gloria slid into her seat at the end, her presence like a seal on the arrangement. "Sometimes," she said dryly, "it's the simplest gestures that mean the most." The waitress poured coffee, set down menus sticky from years of hands. My mother sighed, picking at the corner of hers. "We could have chosen somewhere." "Nicer." I let her words hang. Then I said, "Nicer doesn't always mean kinder. Tonight isn't about chandeliers. It's about showing up." The silence after was thicker than the diner's coffee. Our orders came, burgers wrapped in wax paper, fries spilling over the plates. Olive grinned, reaching for ketchup, oblivious to the tension. I watched them shift in their seats, the discomfort of equality settling like grit. No one at the head, no one exiled, just us, crammed elbow to elbow, forced to face each other. And for the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking under their gaze. I was the one who set the table. The burgers had gone cold by the time I cleared my throat. Conversation had dwindled into the scrape of forks, the occasional sigh. I set my napkin down slowly, letting the silence stretch until even Chase shifted in his seat. "I didn't ask you here just for burgers," I said. My voice wasn't raised, but it carried. "I asked you here because things need to change." My father stiffened, ready to object, but I kept going. "Last week, you put my name on a bill meant to humiliate me. You sat me at the kids' table like I'd never grown up. You think I'll stay quiet forever? You're wrong," Chase scoffed. "So what? You want an apology?" I opened my bag, slid the folder onto the table. The Mercer Family Trust binder. Its weight silenced even the diner's background noise. Lila's eyes widened. "Where did you get that?" "From Walter," I said simply. "He left me more than memories. He left me authority." Chase leaned forward, jaw tight. "You're bluffing." I flipped to the page, turned it toward him. His eyes scanned the line that named me successor trustee. Color drained from his face. Gloria sipped her coffee, expression unreadable. I let the moment settle, then spoke. "I'm not here to evict you. I could. But that's not the point. What I want is respect, a table without games. If you want your lease renewed, if you want Mercer & Co. to keep its headquarters, you'll agree to terms." "What terms?" my mother whispered. "3, I said. 1, no more exclusions at family events. 2, no derogatory remarks. Ever. 3, I'm recognized as equal in this family. No more pretending I don't exist." The words fell heavy, each like a nail in wood. Chase slammed his palm against the table. "This is blackmail." "No," I said calmly. "This is balance." Silence. Even Olive stopped fidgeting, sensing the shift. I leaned back, folding my hands. "You can sign, and we move forward. Or you can refuse, and I end the lease. Either way, I'm done being small." The only sound was the hiss of the diner's fryer in the kitchen. For a long moment, no one moved. The hiss of the fryer from the kitchen was the only sound, like a drumbeat marking time. Chase's fist stayed clenched on the table, but his bravado drained as he glanced at the binder again. His empire wasn't built on glass towers. It was built on a lease. My lease. My father finally broke the silence. His voice was lower than I'd ever heard it. "Erin, this isn't how family should be handled." I met his gaze. "Family should have handled me better." Lila shifted in her seat, chewing her lip. "She's right," she murmured. "Last week was cruel." Her eyes darted to me, then away. Small, but it was something. My mother pressed her napkin tight between her fingers. "We didn't think it hurt that much," she whispered. I let the words sit. Then I said evenly, "It did." Across from me, Chase's jaw worked, stubborn as stone. But slowly he leaned back. his shoulders sinking with the weight of something heavier than pride. He didn't apologize, not outright. But when he finally spoke, it wasn't mockery. "What are the terms again?" he asked, voice rough. I repeated them. No exclusions, no insults, recognition, one table. The waitress arrived with refills of coffee, setting mugs down between us. Chase took his black, staring into the steam as if the answer might rise from it. At last, he gave one short nod. Gloria's eyes softened, Olive beamed, lifting her glass of chocolate milk. "To family, one table," she announced. No one laughed this time. We raised our glasses, uneven, awkward, but together. As I sipped, I thought of Walter's voice, steady as the lake winds. "If someone pushes you away, find your way back." I had, not by shouting, not by breaking, but by drawing a line and waiting for them to cross it. The kids' table was gone. There was only one table now, and for the first time, I wasn't sitting at the edge. I was exactly where I belonged. In the end, this story isn't just about a family dinner or a seat at the wrong table. It's about what happens when people you love make you feel small and how you decide to respond. For years, Erin was treated as invisible, as if her worth could be erased by where she sat or how little she was acknowledged. But dignity doesn't come from the chair we're given. It comes from the boundaries we set, the lines we refuse to let others cross. Many of us know the quiet ache of being overlooked, whether by family, friends, or workplaces that never saw our value. And many of us have also learned, sometimes late in life, that power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, it waits, it writes the rules instead of begging to follow them. Erin's choice to stand firm with outrage reminds us that respect is not demanded. It is created through patience, clarity, and courage. The kids' table was never about furniture. It was about control. And once she reclaimed her place, she showed that the only seat that truly matters is the one we claim for ourselves. Have you ever been asked to sit small when you knew you had more to give? Share your story. Someone out there might need to hear it. May you always find the strength to take your rightful place at the table quietly, firmly, and with grace. Warm wishes, always.